like you to think of something specific, something that will not breach the security of your organization, and that you'll not object to having disclosed to this group. Something personal, perhaps.
Oh. So I have something. Do I have to close my eyes?
It doesn't matter.
Yes, I have something. Hey folks, Kilt-Man here, Kilt-Man at your mind-blowing services. How are you all? Hope you're doing very, very well. Lost my mind there. I don't know about mind-blowing, mate, but I think we've blown the budget on this video production. Special effects and all. Scanners. Made in 1980, released in 1981. To a rather unsuspecting world, David Cronenberg, Canadian body horror auteur, had already made something of a name for himself with the likes of Rabid, Shivers and The Brood. Thing is, Scanners was meant to come before The Brood. As a screenplay, he'd already written it back in 1974 or 75 under the title of Telepathy 2000. But the idea was basically the same sort of thing. It was going to be two rival factions of super powerful, telekinetic, mutants. One who wanted to take over the world and destroy the world of normals, and one, his brother, who wanted to try and live alongside humanity and use the powers for good. But the two didn't get along. And then, of course, The Brood happened because David Cronenberg went through a hell of a messy split up with his partner and fought a horrific custody battle for a child, and that became his horror version of Kramer versus Kramer. Everybody knows this, but it kind of got in the way of Scanners getting made. So Scanners waited a little bit longer. Here's Howard Shore's powerful main theme to it now. Now, because the success of Shivers, Rabid, and then The Brood, financial backing came in, so his biggest, most outlandish movie to date came about. And Scanners was a huge success at the time, not only because of the infamous head explosion, but the great theme as well, that we can't trust scientists, we can't trust government agencies. This is a Cronenbergian staple. It's been throughout a lot of his movies. You've got to look at Rabid, you've got to look at the air, and Shivers, of course. A hotel apartment block is used for an illicit experiment, unleashing a venereal, murderous disease with parasites under the skin. And then Rabid, obviously, rabies comes about in this film because of radical new age surgery and a huge sort of penis, underarm penis. But hey, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Cronenberg had already explored the idea of transformation through disease and mutation, and he loved it. He lifted a huge can of worms there, huge can of parasites, but he loved what he found within. So this early period, this early and the most probably outlandish phase of Cronenberg's quite great career really was, brought a lot of revenue and a lot of great success and a lot of great inspiration and imagination to the genre. He was a great voice. He's deviated from the path ever since. You know, since The Fly onwards, really, and Existence, he's kind of gone into more mainstream, if you count Naked Lunch and Madame Butterfly as, you know, mainstream, and then action thrillers. But he has kind of left the whole horror thing behind. Anyway, so Scanners comes about, and he gets a great cast. He'd already had great casts in the past. You might look at like the Brood, Oliver Reed and Samantha Eggar. He managed to get them, and this was this crazy, you know, big spectacled, hippie-haired Canadian Canuck weirdo, and he managed to attract names like that. And of course, for Scanners, he got Patrick McGoohan, the great Patrick McGoohan, to play, you know, Dr. Paul Ruth. He got Michael Ironside, a young Michael Ironside, and he got Jennifer O'Neill, who was a Hollywood babe, a starlet. She'd appeared alongside many of Hollywood's greats, and for his quietly apocalyptic tale, again, of two scanner, telepath, renegade brothers who are forced against each other by a big moral divide to try and, one wants to subdue the world, one wants to save the world. Sadly, this epic tale of psychokinesis and mind-blowing brains and pulsating veins and all sorts of stuff like is truncated because of a very hectic and shortened shooting and production time. So, and you can tell that now. Now, I love Scanners. I did a video a long time ago about the first ever movies that I owned as in home video. I would be 11 years old, and my mother, God bless her, bought me a Betamax video. Betamax, I was a bit ungrateful about that, until I discovered that Betamax, it wasn't beta, it was better than VHS. And she bought me two films, The Exterminator, yeah, I was 11 years old, and Scanners. And I still have both of them, the originals. There you go, there's Scanners. 10 seconds, the pain begins. 15 seconds, you can't breathe. 20 seconds, you explode. There are 4 billion people on Earth. 237 are Scanners. They have the most terrifying powers ever created, and they are winning. So Stephen Lack, who was not an actor, he'd actually been in a couple of short independent movies, but Cronenberg saw him and thought, I like you. Stephen Lack is actually an artist. He always was. He branched into movies and then he went back into art. And people always say that he's a bad actor, he's a wooden actor. I absolutely disagree. I think his performance in this, especially when he's scanning or being scanned, he's totally in the moment. His expressions, the pain on his face, the agony he's enduring, the battles, the inner turmoil, he is exuding those very, very well. And Michael Ironside, you know, we don't need to introduce him really, although this pretty much was his introduction to mainstream audiences, and he is wonderful as the vicious, despotic, tyrannical Daryl Revick. Cronenberg always has spectacularly unusual names for his characters. Daryl Revick is a great one. Now, Patrick McGoohan plays Dr. Paul Ruth, a sage-like, very erudite, but also very fastidious and strangely weird scientific advisor to a company called Consec Security. Now, their idea is, or at least it was, to use scanners as some kind of weapon, you know, for future wars and that kind of thing, surveillance techniques. But in the famous scene of the head eruption right at the start of the movie, that was it's infiltrated by Michael Ironside's Daryl Revick, who has already founded an underground movement of scanners, and the idea is he wants to take over the world. He hates the way that he's been treated because scanners, the whole idea, the inspiration for scanners, sadly comes from a real life scandal and outrage. Thalidomide, a drug that was used in the 50s for pregnant women to ease their pains and tensions and morning sickness, and it led to the horrific disfigurement and mutation of thalidomide. So his idea for a drug called ephemeral takes shape from that. And this, again, in the world of scanners, is a drug that was introduced to ease, pregnant women's troubles and pains. Ephemeral will make you feel better, but ephemeral has a side effect, and the side effect is creating scanners. So it gets completely forgotten about and quashed. But Dr. Paul Ruth, Patrick McGoohan, has realised, because he's used it on his two sons, and his poor unwitting wife, the mother of these two, and he's observed them. But because they can't control them, no scanners, unless they learn how to control their powers, they are like an open door to all the voices and all the powers in the world. A bit like Highlander. And Michael Ironside was in Highlander 2, The Quickening, don't forget. Once they get the quickening, so long as you just stick with the first Highlander movie, once they get the quickening, they have opened up to everything. All the thoughts, all the emotions from everybody in the world, and possibly beyond. And it's meant to be a great thing, but in Scanner it's not, because you just can't blot out everyone's unspoken thoughts. And it's a danger. You go mad. Darryl Revick, because they can't be controlled, and the ephemeral has obviously not really worked too well in their upbringing. Dr. Paul Ruth has sent them out. They can't deal with him. He's actually been watching Cameron Vale, which is the younger sibling, and that's played by Stephen Lack. He's been watching him, and he's been a down and out of vagrant, but he's watching him. He's watching him from afar. Darryl Revick, on the other hand, has been institutionalized. He tries to alleviate the immense pain and intrusion of all these voices. He's put a drill through his head. In a great flashback sequence, we see some footage of him, black and white grainy footage of Michael Ironside with a bit more hair than usual. And he's got a sort of bandage plaster, sort of like a T across his nose and over the top of his eyes. And he's put an iris on that. And he's being interviewed in this psychiatric ward. And this psychiatric nurse or assessor says to him, like, so Darryl, where did you drill yourself? And he goes, it's kind of obvious, isn't it? In a great sinister bit of, black humour. But in those early sequences, you can see just how good Michael Ironside really is. He's genuinely unhinged and dangerous and unpredictable. But the point of that is to show Dr. Paul Ruth has finally found the other son, the younger son, Cameron Vale, as a down and out. He's tranquilised him, sedated him, brought him in to Consec, and he wants to train him up to become their last weapon in the fight against the bad scanners. So he's showing, although not telling the full story, he's educating Cameron Vale in the ways of scanners, how to train yourself, how to hone and tone your scan so you can control it yourself. But that drug, ephemeral, that's essential as well, because to keep themselves calm and more focused, they must take daily injections of ephemeral to make sure they don't lose their own minds. So you've got these two undergrounds. And I love the way that this film came about. You'd had Carrie, written by Stephen King, obviously, and then directed by Brian De Palma. You'd had The Fury, you'd had The Sender, you'd had Patrick, The Medusa Touch. A lot of films in the mid to late 70s and into the early 80s about telepathic powers and renegade mental abilities. And it's a great concept, of course. And there's a great little correspondence to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining as well, which I noted only just having watched Scanners again like yesterday, and I thought, connection there, maybe tenuous, I don't know. But after the big mind-blowing session at the start of the movie, they obviously, at Consec, they kind of want to, look, we're going to stop this project. How can you stop this project, argues Dr. Paul Ruth, because, we've been infiltrated by someone using scanning techniques. So a scanner is out there, and he got in to our organisation. We have to keep the project going if we're going to fight back against them and keep it going. Otherwise, we're going to lose this war. And Darryl Revick's got an inside man there, played by Lawrence Dane, who's called Keller, and he's the security head chief, and he's a right sadistic bastard, him as well. But Lawrence Dane plays him brilliantly. So he argues back against Paul Ruth. Well, tell me again, how many scanners we've actually got working for us now? And Patrick McGoohan's like, as of last night, none. So there's no project left to cancel then, is there? I said, oh, I've got somebody on ice. I've got someone, a virgin scanner, who wasn't on our list. And this is the important thing. They had a list of 236 scanners that they knew about and were watching. And Daryl Revick was on that list because they've identified him. He was the killer wearing that badge there. I'm joking. That's a prop I made. But Daryl Revick was on that list of 236. Dr. Paul Ruth says, no, we've got another one, which of course is his other son, Cameron Vale. And we're going to train him and we're going to use him as a weapon to infiltrate this other underground movement. And we'll get to Revick and we'll wipe him out that way. So in other words, add him to that list of 236 and you've got 237. Room 237 in Kubrick's The Shining. And The Shining is a telepathic ability. Connections! Oh, he loves them, I does. Whether they're real or not. Cheers, y'all. But Scanners is a great, great movie. It is cold. It is clinical. People that I've shown the film to, even back then when I was a kid and the film had first come out and found its way onto home video in the UK, I was showing it. It was infamous because of the boom ski of the head explosion and the finale, the veins and the eyes popping out and the flaming heads and all that. Yeah, it became infamous, but people who actually sat and watched it were kind of like, I'm bored. This is just, I don't really care about the characters. I understand that. Cronenberg's early style, well, perhaps his main style really with dealing with characters themselves is the lack of empathy that we feel for them. I understand that people don't have empathy for them, but I do. I always have done. In The Brood, very definitely I feel for poor Nola, who's giving birth to her children of her own rage, and for her estranged husband, and for the child, and for Oliver Reed as a psychiatrist who realises he's made mistakes here, and he then has to make a last stand to save the little girl from these hideous, rage deformed, babies of inner turmoil. And then in Scanners, again, I totally understand Stephen Lack as Cameron Vale, his confusion as to what's happening, and then his rage against his own brother. I also understand Daryl Revick's rage against an entire world and society that shunned him and despised him, and he wants to fight back. His master plan, which goes alongside the final conflict with Sam Neill playing Damien Thorne, the older Damien Thorne, who's inherited the Thorne Industries, and he has acolytes all over the world, and you see him wandering around all these, industrialized factory plants and things, because he's got total dominion over all of these people, this army. Daryl Revick himself is manufacturing the drug ephemeral, and he's pumping it out around the world to unwitting doctors who are then pumping it into pregnant women. And the idea is to give birth to an army of scanner babies, which they will be able to control, him and his brother, because he wants to side with his brother to do this. And of course, his brother wants nothing to do with it. And the whole thing is built up around this sort of sibling rivalry and this, oh my God, that was our father. But the problems of the film do come with a very truncated narrative. As I said before, Cronenberg didn't have long enough to actually get that script nailed down. All of a sudden, you've got Cameron Vale is found in a shopping mall. He's unwittingly, because he's a down and out, and he hears the voices of these two women who are like disgusted by this hobo appearance that he has. That he puts the scan on one of them, and she starts having a massive seizure, but he gets spotted doing it. That's how they capture him and bring him in. And then Dr. Paul Ruth, Patrick McGoohan, will tell him, there's a bad guy out there, I want you to go and stop him. Without telling him that, oh, by the way, I'm your dad, and by the way, he's your brother. But he's giving him the backstory. But Cameron has gone from being a down and out with no memories of his childhood, no memories of anything at all, really up until that moment, suddenly becomes a very sharp-witted super spy. He will infiltrate art galleries, he'll infiltrate good scanner followings and groups and learn how group therapy. He will go and find contacts that Daryl Revick has. He will fight off against assassins that Daryl Revick sends out. So, and that transition from being this completely oblivious social misfit to being this directed force that can learn how to control and tone and hone his scanning capabilities so that he can actually join with the nervous system of the Consec central computer to try and get all the names and addresses of all the mums, the expectant mums and the doctors who are administering the drugs to them, to try and put a stop to all of that. He can access that computer remotely, and then when they realise, in a great moment, a great sequence, Keller, Lawrence Dane, realises that, because don't forget, he's on the inside of Consec, but he's working with Daryl Revick really, and he realises he's in the computer now, he's accessing all our secret files, he's going to get all the information about where Ephemeral's going, he could stop it. Right, how do we stop him? I want to hurt him. He's linked, his central nervous system is linked to the computer's central nervous system. How can we do it? Well, we can do a self-destruct mode on the computer systems. So they do it, and at the time, in a great sequence, Cameron and Jennifer O'Neill, who plays Kim Obrist. Jennifer O'Neill, as I said before, Hollywood sort of semi-royalty, and it was a great coup to get her in this movie as well, alongside Patrick McGowan. And she's a good scanner as well, and she believes in Cameron and she fights alongside him when all the rest of their group gets wiped out by these assassins that Daryl Revick incessantly, relentlessly sends out after them. He sends his own scan back down the phone line to the computer and blows the whole thing up, like completely melting the phone in his hand. Sadly, in that sequence as well, you do see a very, very inept stunt couple, a stunt person for Stephen Lack and a body double for Jennifer O'Neill, run out of the phone box, and then a second the phone box blows up. They're rather obviously body doubles, but it doesn't matter. There's another goof as well. Cameron Vale meets a contact with Daryl Revick's, a bizarre schizophrenic scanner who's also an acclaimed sculptor called Benjamin Pierce, who makes these wacky, wild sculptures. And he finds him. He wants to I want to meet Daryl Revick. Get me to Daryl Revick. But Benjamin Pierce has been struggling with his own scanning. My art keeps me sane. My art. Sane. And they're sitting inside, in a great metaphor, visual metaphor, they're sitting inside a huge sculpted head. They're sitting within the skull. But Revick has sent out assassins. And Cronenberg must have got some kind of deal with Remington, because all the assassins are using Remington 870 shotguns, folding stock pistol grips, and they look very futuristic. In fact, pretty much everybody in this film who carries a gun, and that's a lot of people, are carrying these bloody shotguns. So this assassin team goes in there and they do kill Benjamin Pierce, but not before Cameron Vale can get details about how to get to Daryl Revick from him. And then he puts the scan on all of these assassins and sends them hurtling across this barn. However, one of them, who you think is dead, will reappear literally 10 minutes later on as another assassin to take out this friendly group of sort of occupational therapist scanners who are having a combined scan. The power that we can produce when we focus our scans together. And then these assassins come in and start blowing them all away. Cronenberg stages some great action set pieces. During that apartment attack where a lot of good scanners are killed, all our good guys get away and get into a school bus and start ploughing down the streets of I think it's Montreal or Toronto, I'm not too sure. But and then in the background you see another van come up and mount the sidewalk and come alongside them. Slats in the windows open up and all these shotguns come out and start blowing them all away. And Cronenberg stages a great sequence, which was guerrilla filming, where this school bus overturns and ploughs into a record shop window straight into the store itself. And you see a lot of indie avant-garde artists are on the vinyl there, and the Jam. And being a former mod, a massive fan of Paul Weller and the Jam, it's great to see it there. Cheers, Paul. Paul Ruth, Dr. Ruth. Dr. Ruth, forgive me if I'm mistaken here, I could be, but wasn't Dr. Ruth a famous sex therapist on American TV and in American papers and all that? A media sex therapist? You get that kind of weird vibe from McGowan's performance here as well. He gives a very eccentric, idiosyncratic performance. His death sequence, when Keller realises, look, you are working with these guys, these good scanners. I'm working for the bad scanner. And they've escaped from Consec again after another interrogation. Patrick McGowan is telling Cameron Vale mentally, you must access the computer. And then he goes into like a quiet reverie of his own, completely confused. And he sits down in an interrogation room on his own. And Keller sort of runs past and realises, oh, you're that bastard who's been making things difficult for me. And obviously walks up and just blows him away. But I think the screenplay and the hastened time schedule to try and get this film out in time, on time, has played havoc with, a lot of the narrative of Cameron Vale going from down and out with no idea about anything at all to being this super sleuth. And obviously the whole transition of Dr. Paul Ruth maybe confessing and training Cameron a bit more to his final demise. You're not really getting that. So the film, even though the film to a lot of people feels great opening, great climax, and then kind of lots of just talky stuff in between, and cold Canadian, mood. The film does feel cold, They've all got big overcoats on, and it's wet and it's chilly, and that's a trademark of a lot of Cronenberg's movies. Cronenberg's warmest film by far is Videodrome, which I will come on to. I will do a video on Videodrome. But in Scanners, great ideas, hatred for technocrats, a mistrust of science and what science can produce, and the people who actually control the drugs, and the money and the funding for all these things, the weaponized side of science. He hates all of that, but his fascination with mutation, with transformation, with disease. He doesn't see disease as a bad thing or mutation as a bad thing. He wants to study it. Look at The Fly, Jeff Goldblum, and that's his biggest success, genre success. The Fly, everyone loved The Fly. Effects were amazing, but it's a very insular movie where Scanners appears much bigger film. Its ramifications are far greater. The effects are wonderful. The great Dick Smith, The Exorcist, Taxi Driver, was brought in for the final duel between Cameron Vale and Darryl Revick, where the veins are protruding, they're on fire, their faces are erupting. Cameron reaches into his own face, which is on fire and mutating, and pulls this horrible squelchy flesh from his face, his fingers going in deep into his own skull. It's horrific. But he did not do the notorious brain eruption. That was Chris Walas and a couple of other effects guys. Chris Walas designed the Gremlins for Spielberg, and Chris Walas also went on to do The Fly 2. He did the effects for The Fly and then directed The Fly 2. But that was the third attempt to get that head going. First of all, it was clay. It looked like blobs of clay going up. Then it was a more sort of detailed version, but again it didn't look real. So in the end, that head eruption, you had one of the assistant producers was lying on his back underneath that desk with a shotgun, and at the given moment he blows the head apart with that celebrated flower of gore. One of the greatest memes and gifs you could ever have. It's a gift to the gift fraternity. Folks, I adore Scanners. It's cold, it's bleak. The acting is often criticised. The characterisation isn't defined enough. We know good, we know bad. Michael Ironside's performance is electrifying. No, not like him. like Ravok, Darrell, Ravok. Okay, we're going to do it the other way. I'm going to suck your brain dry. Brother should be close, don't you think? And he puts the scan on. Folks, there's so much more I could say about scanners, but I'm going to run out of time. To all those telepaths out there, I'm sending you my thoughts, my deeper thoughts on it. And the crossover at the end, when you think that Revok's won, but the scar's gone, and he's speaking with Cameron's voice, he's got Cameron's eyes. We've won, it's over, we've won. Not true, because Scanners 2, the takeover, and Scanners 3 came out as well, and then Scanner Cop and Scanner Cop 2 came out. Cronenberg has nothing to do with them. His associate producer Pierre David got the rights and moved on to those. Anyway, folks, for now, that's Scanners. I have been, and always shall be, Kilt-Man. Please take it easy, and I'm going to see you all in your scanning dreams.